Welcome to Seniority Authority, the podcast where I track down experts to answer your questions on aging. I'm your host, Kathleen Toomey. Let's get smarter about growing older. If you are a woman of a certain age, do you start to feel invisible? Do you sense that people think of you first as older, although that is not your defining characteristic? Instead of thinking of you as creative or curious or a mom or an explorer. If you've experienced this sensation or have felt this way when you looked in the mirror, I'm old, not I have had such adventures and I have more in my future, then I have a book for you. The Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise by Colleen Oakley is one of the most fun, imaginative, and true books about life, aging, and unexpected adventures that I've read. My guest today, Colleen Oakley, is a USA Today best-selling author whose multiple books have been translated into more than 20 languages. A busy mom of 4 children who lives in Atlanta with her husband, chickens, and a dog. This book was inspired by her grandmother. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of not-for-profit continuing care retirement communities, where independent, active adults find purpose, community, and peace of mind. Visit us at riverwoodsgroup.org. Now, let's hear from today's guest. Welcome to Seniority Authority, Colleen.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am thrilled to have you here. I loved the book. It was fantastic and wanted the adventures to go on. So let's talk about how this began. You were a magazine editor before becoming an author. What led you to the writing life to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to say that I've always wanted to be an author. I mean, from the time I was really little, I wanted to write books. But I think the inspiration for that, I really credit to my mom, because she is a huge proponent of literacy and reading and always read to us kids growing up, and then went back and got her master's degree in adult literacy when I was a kid. So that was always kind of my role model growing up, was how important reading and literacy is. And we spent a lot of time as kids in the library while she was volunteering and tutoring people to get their GED and helping to teach adults how to read. So it's just something that's always been such a hugely important part of my life. And I feel so lucky that I've got to turn it into a career. And now I get to tell stories for a living.
That is wonderful. I'm thrilled about that and the work that your mom has done. And this particular book was inspired by your grandmother. So you have very strong female role models in your life. Can you tell us about the relationship with your grandmother and how that sparked this book?
Yeah, I'd love to. I love being on tour for this book and chatting about it because it gives me the opportunity to talk about one of my very favorite women, who was my grandmother. Her name is Marion Oakley, and she was with us until the bright old age of 92. She passed away a few years ago in February of 2020. And we just had a really, really special relationship. Growing up as a kid, she was one of those, of course, doting grandmothers who spoiled me rotten and just made me feel like the sun rose and set on me, as grandmothers tend to do. And then as I grew into an adult, our relationship really evolved into one of a close friendship. She was somebody who was an incredible listener. We had fascinating conversations. We would read the same books and talk about them. We would go on road trips together, which partly inspired this book about a road trip. And, you know, my grandmother was super pragmatic, but she was also very funny and told wonderful stories herself. And probably my favorite thing about her is that she had one rule when you went to visit her, and that was that it didn't matter, you know, what you did during the day, if you wanted to go shopping or do tourist things or whatever, but everybody had to attend cocktail hour at 5 p.m. You could not miss it.
Terrible rule.
Right. Suffice to say, nobody in my family ever broke that rule, which you can interpret as us being avid rule followers or raging alcoholics. I'll just leave that there.
I love that. I thought you were going to say that the one rule was that you tell stories, but obviously,
Well,
if you're
and
at cocktail hour, that's the time to tell
we
stories.
did. We told lots of raucous stories, and the more cocktails flowed, the better the stories got, as happens. But as far as the inspiration for the book, my grandmother, about 5 years before she passed, was diagnosed with late onset Parkinson's disease, which is a really, really difficult condition. I'm sure some of your listeners, are probably familiar, unfortunately. And the thing that makes it so much more difficult is the bevy of medications that doctors put you on in order to keep the symptoms of Parkinson's at bay. And in my grandmother's case, the side effects of those medications came in the form of very vivid hallucinations and very vivid dreams. So she started to have trouble toward the end of her life distinguishing what was real and what wasn't real, which made our phone conversations a lot more interesting.
I would say.
And she started to say just some really alarming, outrageous things. Like one time, she thought that my aunt was in jail for murdering a man, which my aunt likes me to clarify. She absolutely is not. She's never been caught. No.
Not as far as anyone knows.
Right? As far as anyone is aware. But she also asked me one time if I had sent a check for her for $10,000 to New Jersey. And I said, no, Grandma, I haven't. What for? And she said to pay off my gambling debts.
Oh, that's great.
So my family and I started sharing these stories because she was saying equally alarming things to everyone else. One, because of her great sense of humor, we knew that she would have found them so funny. And two, what better way to deal with the grief of what we were going through than through humor. But at the same time, the wheels in my novelist brain started turning. And I thought, what if any one of these stories was true? My grandmother, who really lived an amazing life in her own right, what if she also lived this completely secret, separate life that nobody in the family knew about? And it was just starting to come out toward the end of her life, which is really when the character of Louise, who's the 84-year-old character in my book, was born, because she certainly has a secret, separate life that nobody in her family knows about. And it starts to catch up to her at the beginning of the book.
And this is so terrific because it really gets to how we think about people as they get older and to understand them as complete individuals, complete, complex, yearning individuals, not just old ladies or old guys. And that's what I love about your book. It uncovers how people really are. And there's one scene in the book that I think is particularly inventive or accurate. And I'm not going to ask you to reveal it necessarily, but it is a scene that's gotten a lot of positive response, shall I say, from the readings you've done so far.
Yeah. It's I think I know the scene you're referring to, which is, it's a scene that I knew I was going to include from the outset of starting to write this book. I gave my 84-year-old character, Louise, a love scene, a sex scene, if you will. And it was super important for me to include that because I wanted Louise to be a fully realized character and show her in all her femininity and all of her desires and all of her, living life to the fullest, which for a lot of people includes sex. And I think that we tend to forget that or turn it into a joke or something when we talk about older people enjoying a robust sex life. And it was really important to me to show it as realism, as just really part of her life. And it has gotten a lot of great feedback, not from my 13-year-old son, however. When I was asked to read this scene in particular in an interview on NPR, and I was so flattered to do so. And we were listening to the interview as a family, and my son walked into the room, stopped, listened for a second, and goes, "Oh, Mom." I mean, he couldn't have been more embarrassed.
Well, you know what I do also love is the juxtaposition between Tanner and Louise. So you talk about, your 13-year-old son and how he doesn't even want to hear it. And the interplay between the characters and their ages and how they come to understand each other differently is another beautiful aspect of the book. It's so much more multidimensional because of the interplay of those two characters.
Thank you. It was really fun to write. They definitely there's a lot of room for humor between their dynamic. Yes. But also, I really have found as an author, this is my 5th book. And the thing I keep gravitating back toward is the importance to me of what it means in the society to have people who seemingly have nothing in common and have such different backgrounds and find a way toward each other, find a way to make sense of the world together. And I think, to me, there's such a divide in our country right now and has been for quite a long time. And it's really just about being able to see things from everybody else's perspective and remember that we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I feel like even though each one of my books is different, that's kind of the overarching message that I'm hope to put out in the world.
You certainly landed it 100% with the Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise because of how you defy aging, how you get these two generations to interact and learn from each other, and the humor that's there, which I absolutely love. Another quote that I read that you had said, which I love, is that we're cultured to fear aging. So we fear people who are aging. And can you talk more about how you learned that at such a young age yourself? It is such a wise insight.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I like to believe that I'm such a young age, but even at my age of 43, I am bombarded with the societal messages that everything I'm supposed to do is to anti-age, to not age. All of my beauty products, the hair color, everything. We just want to stop the clock and not only stop it, but move backward. You're not glorified or revered or celebrated in any way for actually aging, which is a natural phenomenon that occurs to all of us if we're lucky, if we get the privilege to age. And so, I just really wanted to also explore that idea that we don't revere women, especially women. I mean, men certainly struggle with this too, but I think it's especially on women in this society. And that when we do see women in our TV shows, movies, books that are of a certain age, if we see them as characters at all, they're generally tropes or stereotypes or punchlines, as whatever character they're playing. And so it was really important to me to have an 84-year-old woman who was not a trope, a stereotype, or a punchline. Like I said, somebody who had not only lived a wonderful life, but is still living that life at the age of 84 and still has wonderful things to look forward to in her life. I think that's something that we often get wrong about older people in our society is like, oh, they lived this wonderful life and now we put them out to pasture. But no, like they're actually still living a wonderful, interesting, dynamic life. And I think we do well to remember that.
Absolutely. And to give them more adventures. If you're getting smarter, let us know. Leave us a review, a rating, wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends and follow us on social. We're at Seniority Authority on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And don't forget, if you're listening to YouTube, hit the notification bell so you can subscribe. Or subscribe to our newsletter at seniorityauthority.org so you don't miss a thing. What's been the reaction to this book so far, and has it been different than your other 5 books?
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten a really warm reception. I think the thing that's been most special to me about the reaction, because it's such a personal book and it's so reminiscent to me of my grandmother, and that's very special, is I've been getting a lot of emails and feedback from people who read it and it reminds them of their relationship with their grandmother or their aunt or somebody really special in their life. And it brings back a lot of warm memories. And that is just, I mean, I love making emotional connections with readers, but to make that connection has been really special. And I love hearing the stories. I mean, I've been getting such great stories of people who have these memories and they share them with me. And it's just been really, really wonderful.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it's opening up a window to other people's grandparents and their memories and their experience. What do you hope that people will think about when they've put the book down and they've laughed and they've cried? What do you hope they'll walk away with and think about as a result of reading this?
Yeah, well, two things really. I think the first and foremost thing, and one of the reasons I write, is just to truly entertain. I mean, there is so much terrible stuff going on in the world. And if I can give you, a 6-hour escape and you can laugh and enjoy and not think about all the stresses of your life, then I feel like I've done a good job and I'm happy with that. But secondly, with this book in particular, if it can make younger people see older people in a new light, if it makes you stop and say hello to somebody at the grocery store or think of your neighbor more, maybe start a relationship or a conversation with somebody who's older, then that would be really special to me too.
That sounds wonderful. I think you have achieved it as far as I'm concerned. Since you've been thinking about older adults in the writing of this book, is there any advice that you would give to our listeners, people that are listening to Seniority Authority that are 60, 70 plus? Anything that you would suggest they do?
I mean, I wouldn't even deem myself worthy of giving advice. I feel like we should all be listening to the older people with the lived experience and taking advice from them. I know I certainly turned to my grandmother for tons of advice, and my mom too. Now my mom gives me lots of great advice that, of course, I didn't listen to as a teenager, but now that I've gotten older, I'm more open to listening to. So yeah, no, I can't imagine what advice I would give. I would just say, I'm so sorry that our society does not revere you and see you for the whole wonderful person that you are. And I really, really hope that that's changing.
I agree. And I would say live like Louise. Take each day as an adventure and don't let people put you in a box.
Love that. I love that. Everyone should live like Louise, no matter what age you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I ask, what are you working on next? And how do you find your ideas in terms of what you're writing?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on my 6th book, and just very briefly, I can't talk too much about it because I'm still kind of in the middle of it, but it's essentially about a couple who's been married for 19 years, and they're on the brink of divorce. It's a little bit rocky, and they go to this very isolated, very ritzy restaurant on a cliff in California to celebrate their 19th wedding anniversary. And while they're eating, an underground eco-terrorist organization bursts into the restaurant and takes everybody hostage. And it's called
Oh my gosh.
Dan at the End of the World.
Jane and Dan at the End of the World. That's fabulous. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. So it's like Tanner and Louise, it's got adventure and it's got a lot of humor and a lot of heart. And it's certainly exploring that stage of marriage when you've been in it for some time and you've still got a long road to hoe. And also what it's like to be a woman in her 40s, which is something I'm learning a lot about currently.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds really good. Okay.
Thanks.
I will look for that. And for our listeners, there will be a link in our show notes to the mostly true story of Tanner and Louise. And what I'd like to do before we say goodbye is to ask you a few questions about yourself. So we know you're a phenomenal author, you're a successful mom, and have a very busy life. But let's get to know you a little bit better. Can you share with our listeners what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
It's a little bit embarrassing, but
Yeah.
I guess that's why they call it a guilty pleasure, right?
Yes.
I love the show Love is Blind on Netflix, which is like a reality dating show where couples don't get to see each other. They date like behind a wall, essentially.
Oh.
So they just get to talk and get to know each other, and then they get engaged sight unseen.
Oh my
And
gosh.
oh my gosh, it's a mess, but I love it.
All right. Oh, wow. Okay. I'll have to check that out. That would be very interesting to
Yes.
observe. Okay. How many seasons has it been on?
Oh my gosh, I think the 5th season is coming up, and I've watched all of them.
Okay. Thank you. That is truly a guilty pleasure. Okay. All right. I'm sure with your animals and your chickens and where you live, you have a lot of healthy practices, but what's your favorite healthy practice?
I think my favorite healthy practice is I walk every single day. I think I accepted in my 40s, I just don't love to run. I'm not like a big, I used to force myself to do it. It felt like you had to, but now I really enjoy just a gentle walk with my dog. I get to clear my head, sometimes loosen some knots in the story I'm working on, but I really, really love it. Something I think that I can continue to do for the rest of my life, a daily walk.
I love that practice. So many of the experts that I've had on this show talk about the importance of use it or lose it, and movement, and just getting out and doing a walk costs you nothing. You don't need any equipment. You don't need a person to be with you. And especially the power of getting outside in nature is so good for our souls.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I always feel better after I've done it. You could just be having a bad day, but after a walk, you always feel a little bit better.
That is great advice for all of our listeners. What's guaranteed to make you laugh?
The show Schitt's Creek.
Oh,
have you seen that?
Ew, David.
Yes.
I love that show. That is awesome. I saw something the other day that said they wished Moira Rose was their GPS voice.
Oh, God, that'd be fabulous.
Wouldn't it? With all kinds of unusual asides. Yes, that is a great show. I love that. Tell us about the last book you loved.
The last book I loved it's called Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck. Have you read that?
Oh my gosh. I finished that this weekend. It's amazing.
Amazing. Like, it blew my mind. I laughed. I cried. It's just so unique and weird and brilliant. I loved it. I can't stop talking about it.
I feel the same way. And if you described it to anyone, it's this guy who has a disease where he turns into a shark, a great white shark, and it's his love life with his wife and what happens after. It sounds so bizarre, but it is the writing is gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. And I would have loved to be a fly on the wall when she told that idea to her agent. Her agent was probably like, okay.
Or if you were the editor that picked her out of the slush pile and was like, this is going to be good. It's Shark Heart, really one of the best debut books I've read this year.
Amazing.
Favorite escape?
Oh, favorite escape. Probably the beach, I would say. But I mean, just anywhere with water, I think, because water just seems to like revive my senses. I just feel more at ease and relaxed by the water. So lake, stream, pond, ocean water. I love it all.
Something a little bigger than a puddle.
Yeah. But I'll take it if that's all there is.
Colleen Oakley, thank you so much for being on the show. I wish you and the Mostly True Adventures of Tanner and Louise a lot of success. Listeners, do yourself a favor and find yourself an opportunity to get this book, laugh, cry, and walk away with an understanding, a deeper understanding of how we can think about ourselves as older adults.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about it.
It's been delightful. Thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate your time. That's our show for today. If it helped you think differently, will you help us? Go to the Seniority Authority page on your podcasting app and hit either the plus, heart, favorite, or subscribe button so you don't miss out. And tell your friends so we can spread the word. Until then, enjoy the chance to get smarter about growing older. That's our show for today. If you liked it, please tell your friends so we can reach more minds and keep the conversation going. Or follow us on social at Seniority Authority. I'm Kathleen Toomey. Until next time, enjoy your chance to get smarter about growing older.